Hello, here I am again in the name of the sovereign creator of heaven and earth, the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm continuing with my exposition, my translation of Luke's Gospel. We are in the upper room that last night, chapter 22, verse 24. Now, verses 24 through 30, the disciples want to know which of them is going to be the greatest. Verse 24. Now, there had actually been a discussion among them as to which of them seemed to be greater. So he said to them, the kings of the nations lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greater among you become as the younger, and he who leads as he who serves. Who is greater, the one reclining or the one serving? Is it not the one reclining? Yet I am among you as the one who serves. However, you are those who have continued with me in my trials, and I bestow on you a kingdom, just as my Father bestowed one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom. Also, you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. For the moment. Yeah, those guys, they wanted to know which one of them was going to be. And the Lord tells them to cool it. Okay, the nations, they're like that. They've got rulers and big guys and whatnot, and they like to be called benefactors. No, not among you. You have to follow my example. Okay, I am, as a matter of fact, the teacher, but I am serving. Matter of fact, he just washed their feet. If you want to lead, serve. After that mild rebuke, if you like, in verse 28, the Lord now gives him a word of appreciation. Says, okay, you are the ones who have continued with me in my trials. Matter of fact, he's thanking them for that. And now he says, not only that, I am bestowing on you a kingdom, just like my Father bestowed one on me, so that you may eat and drink with me in my kingdom. He wants them to be with him, as a matter of fact, except for, of course, the Iscariot. They are and will be. Now, this bit about the 12 thrones, the 12 tribes. That means that the 12 tribes still exist, right? Have you ever heard about the 10 lost tribes? We don't know where they are, but God does. He knows where they are, who they are. 12 tribes. This will be during the Messianic reign, during the millennium. 12. They will be sitting, of course, not the Iscariot. And of course, one wonders who is going to be sitting on the Iscariot's throne. I have my own candidate, but we'll find out when we get there. Sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, curiously enough, to one's ideas about things, the Lord says there's going to be eating and drinking in the future kingdom. Well, of course, during the millennium, there certainly will be eating and drinking. Maybe that's the story. But in heaven, how would that work? Because you can't have sewage in heaven, right? You can't have the leftovers. Interesting. Verses 31 through 34. Peter will deny him. Then the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you, you plural, as it happened, you, so as to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, you singular, so that your faith not fail completely. So you, when you have recovered, strengthen your brothers. But he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. So he said, I say to you, Peter, no rooster can crow today before you deny 3 times that you know me. Now, this is the second warning that the Lord gave Peter, telling him that he was going to betray him, or deny him. Sorry, I said that wrong. John records the first warning, if you like. It's very obvious that happened early on in what happened up there in the upper room, and here in Luke is probably near the end. But if you compare the 2 accounts, what is said is totally different, totally different. So we have here the second warning, actually. The Lord warning Peter, you're going to deny me. In this case, you know him. Note, by the way, the first warning is recorded in John 13, verses 37 and 38. You can check that for yourself. Now, the problem of Peter's denials has given, enemies of the Bible have thought they had good ammunition, because you check the 4 accounts and four Gospels, and no 2 of them are the same about Peter's denials. And so they say that they use this as an argument against the inspiration of the Bible and stuff. I have written, I don't know, it's at least 8 pages, if it's not 12 pages, a very thorough discussion of not only the 4 warnings the Lord gave Peter, but then the actual denials. And there were, as you know, there were 2 rooster crows. And in fact, Jesus said he would deny at least 3 times before the first rooster, another 3 times at least before the second. And as we check the facts, we find that happened precisely so. But it is not obvious, and you have to really look at with care to figure out what happened. I think I have done that. Like I say, it's at least 8 pages, if it's not 12 or more. You can find it in the appendix of my third edition of the New Testament. That's the English translation. You can also get it free from my website, prutch.org. Now, notice that the word you in English is ambiguous as to whether singular or plural. That's too bad. Years ago, they had he, that was plural, and thou, that was singular. Oh well. He starts out, Satan asked for you, all of you. He says, now I have prayed for you, Peter, singular. What did Jesus pray about him? That your faith not fail completely. Obviously, the Lord did not pray for Judas. He did pray for Peter. Your faith not fail completely. When you have recovered. Some translations have converted. Bad. This is not a case of his being saved. That's what we usually mean by no. When he recovered from his fall, he was going to have a nasty little fall. When you have recovered, strengthen your brothers. Now we come to a really strange one. He says to buy a sword. Let's read verses 35 through 38. Then he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, or sandals, did you lack anything? And they said, nothing. So he said to them, but now he who has a money bag should take it, and likewise a knapsack, and he who has no sword must sell his garment and buy one. because I say to you that this which is written must still be fulfilled in me. Quote, and he was classed with the lawless, end quote, and because the things concerning me have an end. So they said, look, Lord, here are two swords. And he said to them, it is enough for the moment. Notice the reference to when he sent them out 2 by 2, and they couldn't take anything. They had to be totally dependent on the hospitality of where they went. And he says, did you lack anything? He said, no, worked fine. But now he changes the rules. No, he has changed the house, not that way anymore. Now, if you have a money bag, you take it along, and you need everything else too, knapsack, whatever. And now he says you ought to buy a sword. Now that is a little bit different. Like a money bag and a knapsack, okay, but a sword. Well, if you are obviously armed, this tends to slow down people who are thinking about attacking, but if they see that you're armed, that slows them down. If they think that you are not armed and you have no way of defending yourself, well, they come on with greater confidence to attack you, take advantage of you. I would say, however, that far better than that is to use our spiritual power, which we have. We have spiritual power. We can take people's thoughts captive against Christ, and other things we can do. We don't have to rely upon physical weapons. But it's simply a matter of fact. I could give you cases in my experience of colleagues here in Brazil, missionary and so on and whatnot. But the fact that you have a weapon visible that tends to slow down anyone who is thinking of attacking you. Just a matter of fact. If they see a weapon, well, whether you're going to use it or not is another question. Our spiritual power, we should know how to use, and we should be using it. We can defend ourselves that way. He who will be classed with the lawless, you'll find that in Isaiah 53, verse 12. They had, for some reason, there actually were two swords in that room. Like these guys, they were fishermen. What did they know about using it? But they had two swords. And they said, hey, we've got two. And the Lord, okay, that's enough for right then. For right then. But now that, what he was the bit about money bag and knapsack and sword, of course, that was for the future. Now we come to verses 39 through 46. Gethsemane. Then going out, he went to the Mount of Olives as his custom was, and his disciples followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, pray so as not to enter into temptation. Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you would just remove this cup from me, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him, and being in anguish, he prayed with total concentration. Then his sweat became like clots of blood falling to the ground. When he rose up from prayer and came to the disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. He said to them, why do you sleep? Get up and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. For the moment. Now, if you check parallel accounts, after they got there, he left 8 of them behind and took Peter, James, and John on a little ways further with him. Then he left them behind and went a little ways further yet. So this bit about a stone's throw, probably with reference to the three, but Luke doesn't mention the three. Of course, the Iscariot is no longer here, right? So there's 11 disciples. Pray not to enter into temptation, but they are going to get tempted and they're going to succumb not far down the line here. Now, we know from Matthew, other places, that actually Jesus prayed 3 times, came to the disciples, went back 3. Now, lamentably, it's just really sickening, if you will, that the so-called critical Greek text, really an eclectic text, it's a patchwork quilt, currently in vogue, places verses 43 and 44 in double brackets, which means they deny that Luke wrote it. They do that based following 1.3% of the Greek manuscripts of objectively inferior quality. Well, this is important information that is not found anywhere else. And how could Luke know this? Where did this information come from? Okay, the disciples, probably the 8 of them are really too far away to see or anything. But even the 3 that are closer, they're asleep. Okay, Peter, John, Jesus goes and Peter's asleep, and Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, how come you're asleep? When you're asleep, you don't see anything, right? You don't hear anything when you're asleep. Besides, it was dark. It was night. Oh, even if they were awake, how could they see the drops of blood falling down? All right. Where did this information come from? It had to be by divine inspiration. As a matter of fact, Luke in verse 3 of chapter 1, he claims this. Well, I got this from up above. He says that. We should just stay with the 98.7% of the manuscripts that are all better than the 1.3 that omit this. Another, for total certainty, Luke wrote, being in anguish, total concentration, and so on. I believe that this bit about praying with and the drops and so on, this explains Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 7. He gave one loud cry, a cry of anguish. Now notice to transpire blood is normally fatal as a medical condition. If you do this, you die. So Jesus came very close to dying there in Gethsemane. But he had to get to the cross. You go to Hebrews, he says he cried out with strong crying, with a loud cry and tears, to him who was able to save him from death. Well, God did not save him from death on the cross, right? Okay, he died, all right. So when did God save him from death? In the garden. He would have died, but of course he came to die, but not there, and not then. He had to get to the cross. So the Father sends the angels to strengthen him. We better have total certainty that the true text has these verses, just like Luke wrote them here. Well, he actually came to the disciples several times. You check the other one. Temptation is going to happen right away. Now, here in Luke, from 47 through 53, we have Luke's account of the betrayal and the arrest. His account is not all that short, but it's not all that long either. If we compare the parallel passages, we get a whole lot more detail. All 4 Gospels give us some information. I have prepared a harmony, which will be available. It is available already in the appendix of my translation. Harmonizing the accounts of the betrayal and arrest. And the harmonization, it includes the stuff that's in Luke. Okay, so you'll get Luke, but you'll get also all the other. Coming now to the Lord's sacrifice on our behalf, this is the central part of our faith, and we need to have all the information we can, which is how come I bother doing a harmonization and I stop to give you the whole story, the whole picture, or at least as far as we can do it from the 4 inspired accounts. So this is my harmonization sequence of events. 1, the crowd arrives. You'll find that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, all 4. The 4 just simply state the fact. Luke, however, emphasizes that Judas was leading them, and John implies that. Number 2, Jesus knocks them down, and that's only found in John 18, 4-9. Where he said, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus the Nazarene." "Well, I am he." They're all on the ground on their backs. He says that, and they all fall down. They're all knocked down. That's a very interesting bit, If you were one of those people and someone knocked you down with his word, I would get up. As soon as I could get up, I'd be taking off as fast as I could take off. I don't want to mess with someone who can knock me down with his word. Which leads me to say the following. I take that event to be a cyst of supernatural intervention to make clear that the Father has not lost control of the events. I say cyst because then the crowd carries on as if nothing had happened. Oh, look, a person delivered from demonic control often does not remember what he did while under that control. And this may have been something similar, only of course on the other side, God doing it. Now we come to the kiss. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the 3 of them mention this. Only those 3. This is really a pitiful bit. I here offer a harmonization, taking those 3. Now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he it is. Seize him and take him securely." So upon arriving, he went directly to him. So Jesus said to him, "Friend, what brings you here?" Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. So Jesus said to him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of the Man with a kiss?" Just for the moment, I want to say 2 things about that. Notice that Judas had told them to bring him securely. Why was that? Well, of course, Judas had seen so many manifestations of Jesus' power. As a matter of fact, he should have known better. Okay, he should have known better. But of course, he was under Satan's control at that point. But obviously, they expected resistance. You'll read in John and other places, there were soldiers there, and they had swords and clubs. So they were expecting resistance. Now, this conversation between the Lord and Judas is interesting. Jesus knew perfectly well why Judas was there. But why does he call him friend? And why does he ask, "What brings you here?" Jesus knew why he was there. Why did he call him friend? I don't know. But perhaps to show that he held no personal animosity against him. After all, the Father's plan was being fulfilled. A kiss. That was really pretty low down. Okay, number 4. So then they grab Jesus. That's in Matthew 26 and Mark 14. Judas served as guide, but I take it that Malchus was actually in charge of the operation. He may have taken the lead in grabbing Jesus, which is why Peter swung at him. This grabbing precipitated the reaction that followed. So now we come to Peter's sword. Luke doesn't give us the name, doesn't tell us who did it. John tells us who did it. But they all four mention the sword: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I here offer another harmonization, putting the pieces together. When those who were around him saw what was about to happen, they said to him, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then Jesus reacted by saying, "Allow at least this," and touching the man's ear, he healed him. Then Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will die by the sword. Do you actually suppose that I cannot call upon my Father right now, and he will place beside me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that it has to happen this way? The cup that the Father has given me, must I not drink it?" That's my harmonization. Now, the text referring to Malchus says "the servant." So I take it that the high priest had probably put Malchus in charge of the operation, and John evidently knew him personally, knew his name. And as you may recall, after the arrest, and there was a Roman general there and Roman soldiers, but they did not take Jesus. It was the priest that kept Jesus after he was. August, poor Peter was not used to handling a sword. All he manages to do is to take off the guy's ear, his right ear, as a matter of fact. Well, it's a good thing that Jesus healed him, right? Have you ever thought what would have happened if Jesus hadn't healed that ear? Things would have probably gotten pretty nasty, and especially for Peter. Okay? However, Peter's attack obviously caused them to release Jesus. In particular, if Malchus was the first guy to grab Jesus and Peter takes off his ear, then of course Malchus turns loose. And that's how come Jesus' hands were free to touch Malchus' head. Okay, touched him, healed it. But if Jesus hadn't done that, oh well. But notice what Jesus says to Peter about the angels. 12 legions of angels. 36,000 angels. You think that'll probably be enough to handle the situation? 36,000 angels. He says at least or more. Anyway, Jesus is saying, Peter, this is not the place for the sword, okay? The Father's plan is being carried out. Just cool it. Everything's under control. The cup that the Father is giving, must I not drink it? Now Jesus actually addresses the crowd. Number 6, that's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Again, I offer a harmonization of what the 3 accounts give. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come against him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as against a bandit to arrest me? I used to sit daily with you in the temple, teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has happened so that the scriptures of the prophets should be fulfilled. This is your hour, even the authority of the darkness." The authority of the darkness. This was Satan's hour. It was part of the Father's plan. The darkness refers to Satan's kingdom. But notice what the Lord says is your hour. In other words, he was saying that they were serving Satan. They were part of Satan's kingdom, as indeed they were. So Now, number 7, the disciples all run away. That's in Matthew and Mark. They just state the fact. They all take off. First, and then number 8, Jesus then is taken away. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John mention it. The 4 accounts, they state the fact. The first 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are in essential agreement. That is, they say that they took him to Caiaphas' palace where the Peter's denials and the judging and all that took place. John, however, has something different. John tells us there was a Roman detachment there. He's the only one that mentions it, I think, with its commander, and the word for commander here is chiliarch. That's a commander of 1,000 men. At the very least, a cohort of 600. Now look, Jerusalem wasn't all that big. There wouldn't be all that many soldiers there in Jerusalem. So there would only be one. This would be a general, if you like. There would only be one there in Jerusalem. So what is the commanding military officer doing in Gethsemane at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, come on. Obviously, Pilate had been informed and was participating. Obviously. I've written a rather long article about Pilate and how everything had happened to him, but not now. But now, the next thing that John says that no one else says is that they took him to Annas first, because he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas. Well, the bigger reason was that Annas was the real high priest. According to the law, the office of high priest was for life. But the Romans had obliged the Jews to name a political high priest every year, and that was the guy that dealt with the government stuff. That, I suppose, to reduce the political power of the real high priest. But Annas was definitely the power behind the throne. As it happens, Caiaphas was the political high priest that year, and he was the one that dealt with Rome and so on. But they went first to Annas, sorry. And then John points out that then he was taken to Caiaphas. That was at Caiaphas' place where the judging took place and Peter's denials took place and everything else like that. That interim between Annas and Caiaphas was probably used to gather the council who would not want to be dragged out of bed unless Jesus was actually in hand. This was probably between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning by that time. Well, that was my harmonization of the accounts. I've included everything that Luke says. So I'll go back now to Luke. We'll just bypass now verses 47 through 53 because I've already included that in the harmonization. So now we come to verses 54 through 62. And here's these Peter's denials. That's Luke's account of Peter's denial. Verse 54, then they seized, took, and brought him to the house of the high priest, with Peter following at a distance. Now when they had kindled the fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a certain servant girl, seeing him sitting by the fire, looked intently at him and said, This man also was with him. But he denied him, saying, Woman, I do not know him. After a little while, another saw him and said, You also are one of them. But Peter said, Man, I am not. Then after about an hour had passed, another started insisting, Surely this fellow also was with him, because he is a Galilean. But Peter said, Man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked directly at Peter. Then Peter remembered the Lord's word and how he had said to him, "Before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And going outside, he wept bitterly. Poor Peter. Jesus said, Satan has asked to sift you guys like wheat. And but Peter, you see, was very, very well impressed by himself. He said, "No, not me. No, nothing like that can happen to me." Now, as I've said, each of the 4 Gospels gives you a different selection of events. Each of them gives you only 3 denials, but each one gives a different set of 3 denials. You can check that for yourself. If you add them all up, there are at least 8 denials. My own understanding is that there were 4 before the first rooster, another 4 before the second. I have it all spelled out, detail by detail, in my paper on that. 8 pages or 12, whatever many pages it is, at least 8. Oh, poor Peter. While he was still speaking, a rooster. In all the accounts, all 4 Gospels, it's always a rooster, never the rooster, always a rooster. In other words, Jesus always was the obligatory absence of any rooster crow until Peter had denied at least 3 times. Jesus never said only 3 times. Jesus always said that a rooster could not crow until Peter had denied 3 times. He could deny more than that, but not less than that. And the rooster could not crow until there were 3. As a matter of fact, I think there were 4 before each of the 2 rooster crows. Now notice verse 61. The Lord turned and looked directly at Peter. Now, how did that happen? Well, the fire was in the courtyard, and the guards and the guys and whatnot, people were out here. But this is right up here. Probably there had to be a window, a fair size window, for the large room where the Sanhedrin was. And obviously, Jesus was standing with his back to that window. So, of course, Caiaphas was facing Jesus on the other side, and therefore John makes a point of the fact, as a result of Caiaphas questioning Jesus and mentions, "I will tell the guys down here," then question Peter. Of course, big room. It was early in the morning, cold outside, but not in the 50 or more people in there. Who knows? And of course, the windows had to be open so they could hear Caiaphas. And Jesus, but at this moment, all of a sudden, Jesus turns around and stares at Peter. And that stare broke the satanic hold on Peter's mind. And Peter woke up and understood what he had done. And he goes out and weeps bitterly. Poor Peter. Poor Peter. But you see, he had been a bit proud, he had been a bit uppity. Matter of fact, he contradicted Jesus to his face when the Lord told him the 3rd and 4th time that he was going to deny him. Okay, now we come to verses 63 through 65. The men who were guarding Jesus started mocking and beating him, and having blindfolded him, they would hit his face and ask him, saying, "Prophesy, who was it who struck you?" And they kept saying many other insulting things to him. Now, one of those things, if you were using the NIV or any modern version, you don't have "they would hit his face," and that's in 2% of the manuscripts. that omitted. Stay with the 98 that are all better than those 2%. Now, these guys are really cowardly and perverse. Okay, they blindfold him. They blindfold Jesus, and then they start slapping him on the face. Tell us who slapped you. Yeah, that's dirty. Okay, that is just plain dirty. But of course, they were demonized, no doubt. Already in the garden, the Lord had said, "This is Satan's hour." Okay, that's what's going on. Now we come to the crucifixion day. This is of course from already very early morning. I now read verses 66 through 71, which will be finished chapter 22. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both the chief priests and scribes, came together and brought him before their councils, saying, "If you are the Messiah, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you simply will not believe. But if I also question you, you will neither answer nor release me. Hereafter, the Son of the Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." Then they all said, "Are you then the Son of God?" So he said to them, "You say it because I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We ourselves have heard it from his mouth." Well, this is all very abbreviated. The whole thing was dirty, okay? According to the law, they could not make Jesus testify against himself. They had to produce at least 2 witnesses that would agree about the charges. And they tried, but they couldn't find any. So now the chief priest makes Jesus condemn himself. "If you are the Messiah, tell us." Well, he had given ample proof that he was the Messiah, and they knew that. They just didn't want to acknowledge it. Well, the Lord says, if I tell you, you're not going to believe it, and then you're not going to release me anyway, and whatnot. In other words, Jesus says that he knows and that they know. What they're doing is all a farce, and they knew it. So now, finally, he gives them all that they want. He gives them a little bit more than they want. You're going to, or he says, hereafter the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. That was more than they asked for. But then he says, "Are you then?" And he says, "I am." That, of course, reminds you who said that way back when. And so they, of course, condemn him to death for blasphemy. In other Gospels, they use that word, blasphemy. Well, just a minute. Truth cannot be blasphemy, right? If you say you're the Messiah and you are the Messiah, then that's not blasphemy. You're just stating a fact. Well, Jesus was simply saying the truth. That's a fact. And they knew that, but they didn't want to accept it, so they called it blasphemy. That would justify killing him according to the law of Moses. And so, verses 1 through 5, he's taken to Pontius Pilate, chapter 23, 1 through 5. Then the whole crowd of them rose up and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, declaring himself to be Christ the King." So Pilate questioned him, saying, "Are you the King of the Jews?" In reply, he said to him, "You said it." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no guilt in this man." But they insisted, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee even to here." And now the Galilee will bring on Herod, but let's just see what we have here first. Luke's account here is very brief. You really need to check the other accounts. I have a paper on that actually. It goes into detail about, it's called, what is it called? Something about, poor Herod, wrong place, wrong time, something like that. It's about the poor Pilate, wrong place. I go into detail. You'd have to get, I don't have a harmony right here. So I'm just telling you that Luke is very brief. This bit about forbidding to pay taxes and so on, this came later on. This was not at the beginning. Luke is just giving the essence of it, of the real accusation against him that could be used before Caesar. If you tell people not to pay taxes, that of course would be treason against Caesar. And if you're a king, depending, well, of course, in other gospels, you see Jesus tells Pilate that he was, but his kingdom wasn't from down here. In that case, Pilate said, well, then you're not a problem. The only thing that's a problem for Rome is if you're down here. But anyway, so this is all so brief. And Pilate says, "Oh, you're the king?" He says, "Yeah, you said it." In other words, he is. And in John, other place, he goes into detail. That's why I was born. That's why I came. So that's why Pilate says, "Hey, I don't find any guilt in this chap. Certainly nothing that's worth killing him." Just by the way, going back, when they say he teaches not to pay taxes, that was a plain lie. Jesus never taught that. It just was a plain, bald lie. Mentions Galilee. So now Pilate did not want to kill Jesus. You get this? For here's Galilee, and for some strange reason, King Herod was right there. So let's read verses 6 through 12. When Pilate heard Galilee, he asked if the man was a Galilean. Upon learning that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem during those days. Now, when Herod saw Jesus, he was really pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him, having heard so many things about him, and he was hoping to see some miracle performed by him. He questioned him with many words, but he, that's Jesus, gave him no answer. On their part, the high priests and scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers, after ridiculing and mocking him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Parenthesis, that very day Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, previously having been at odds with each other, close parenthesis. The modern versions omit Galilee in verse 6, following 0.5% of bad manuscripts. No. He had to know that's how come he sent the man to Herod. And just why was there? This is very early in the morning, okay? This was 6 o'clock in the morning, if not before. And Herod, or Pilate, is dressed and ready and waiting, and Herod is dressed and waiting. There's an awful lot more went on behind the scenes than you might suppose if this is all you've read. Herod was simply irrelevant to Jesus. It was Pilate that had to condemn him to death to get to a cross, and he had to die on the cross. So Jesus simply ignores Herod, doesn't answer. That, of course, frustrates Herod rather badly. What can they do? Well, they just make fun of him, and they put this marvelous robe on him and send him back. Poor Pilate. He wanted to get rid of the problem, and it comes back dressed in a marvelous robe. Verse 12 gives us a curious fringe benefit, if you like. They had been at odds, and all of a sudden they've decided to be friends. That is Pilate and Herod. That's a curious little tidbit there. Anyway, now we come now to the crucifixion. Pilate is going to sentence Jesus here, and beginning at verse 26, Jesus will actually be taken away and crucified. Now, the four Gospels give us a whole lot of very information about the crucifixion, and since the crucifixion is absolutely central to our Christian faith, next video I'm going to just pause my exposition here of Luke, and I'm going to give you a harmonization of all four accounts of the crucifixion. And that's going to take a full video. It'll take us 50 minutes probably or so. But I want you to have the whole picture, because after all, the crucifixion is the central piece of our religion, of our faith. And of course, without the resurrection, it'd be in vain, but there was, of course, the resurrection. So I'm going to stop now with this video, and I'm going to interrupt Luke, like I say, but the next video I will give you a harmonization of the crucifixion accounts, if our Lord permits. Okay? Thanks for watching. God bless.